Good, good.
Okay, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're very, very busy.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah. I just wanted to know, how did you get into politics and when was this? I mean, high school was a long time ago, but did it start then?
Yeah, so looking back, I never really thought about it, but I was like class president
Oh,
when I was in high school. So I guess that was
that
my
counts.
first toe dip into politics, where I had to solicit votes and whatnot and plan things. And so that I think that was kind of my first political experience. I also started Students for Obama on Grand Valley State University's
Okay.
campus. And I didn't really think of any of these things as really being political per se. Always have felt an overwhelming need to do something. And it wasn't because I imagined myself being a politician one day, or I imagined myself being a lawyer one day. I just really always wanted to do the best I could with the position that I was currently in,
Okay.
is the best way to put it. I've always had this super strong sense of justice. And so when Barack Obama ran for office, it just really inspired me. And I really didn't realize that a lot of people didn't come from the same background and mindset that I did. So when I started Students for Obama on Grand Valley State University's campus, looking back, I'm like, wow, that was really kind of like uh, something, because it's very conservative over there. But
Oh,
I just didn't even have the wherewithal to even know that. I just wanted Barack Obama to get elected.
is that your
So,
alma mater, Grand Valley?
what was that?
Is that where you graduated from?
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Um, so I decided to go to law school. I took a year off and worked after college. And in law school, I actually don't know how this happened, but I started working on campaigns. So one of the campaigns that I worked on were for Michigan Supreme Court. And I don't know how I was contacted. I think I joined the local Democratic group that was in my law school, and they're like, hey, do you want to volunteer on this campaign? And I'm like, sure. So I don't know, I just always wanted to help and make sure that good people were elected. That was always kind of my primary goal. And so one thing led to another, where Judge Sheila Johnson, who is the chief judge in 46th District Court, which is the court that serves all 5 communities that I now serve, she took me under her wing. She mentored me and just introduced me to a lot of people. So I was helping her run for office for Michigan Supreme Court, with which she didn't win that, but I was also working to help Bridget Mary McCormick, who is now the Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court. So after I volunteered on those campaigns, and I worked on, or I should say volunteer with, I never got paid for Southfield
That
City
shows your
Council.
dedication to.
Yeah, I really just wanted help. So I worked on a couple city council campaigns, as well as the mayor, current Southfield mayor. And I just wanted to do more. So
Okay.
I joined the Southfield Total Living Commission, became a commissioner for the city of Southfield, was planning on running for Southfield City Council. But then this position became available, and the seat became open. So I decided to run for it after a lot of coaxing. I was not the person that says, oh, the seat's open, let me go run for that. No, I participated in a program called Emerge, which trains Democratic women to run for office. And at that time I was planning on, and this was in like January of 2017. So right after Trump, but that's not what caused me to run for office. So I did this like 6-month long training to run for office, and was going to run for city council. and this the state rep seat became available, and more than a few people urged me to run for the seat, and I told them all no. And
what were your hesitations, because it required a lot of campaigning, or?
Yeah, well, one of the things was I had just, well, I shouldn't say just, I was a year into my job at a private law firm. And so, you know, they were kind of grooming me to be on the partner track, and it's a Black-owned law firm. So, I mean, just a really great historical law firm in Detroit. And so it was like, do you want to take this path or do you want to take this path? The other thing is, you know, running for office is scary. You're kind of running a business or maybe a nonprofit because you have to raise money unless you're independently wealthy, of which I am not. And so raising money, just being publicly scrutinized, you really have to put yourself out there. And you have to sell yourself to people as to why you're the best person. And all of that was terribly scary for me. I just didn't know. I just didn't know if I was ready for like the public scrutiny. And I also look very young. So, that was a thing.
Like, oh,
so even after I decided to run for office, because I just decided that I was the best person for the job, and that was just it. Like, I think that I'm the best person for the job. You know, I would be knocking doors and people would say, you know, like, where are your parents? Like, are you old enough to vote?
wow.
A lot of kind of just
young blood. We do need young blood. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I will always, you know, bring it back to and say, well, one, I've been voting for quite some time. And I am legally able to drink, and I can vote and do I can rent a car. I can do all of the things. I was 29 when I won my election. So I really wasn't all that. Actually, I had just turned 30. The primary was literally a week after my birthday. So I was 30 when I won my primary election. So I was 30 when I, you know, won office.
That's a nice birthday gift for 30.
It was, and I was knocking doors, and I would say, you know, my birthday's in a week. I can really, you know, if you want to get me something, you can vote for me. But it was also a lot of hard work. I had to take leave from my job, so I wasn't getting a paycheck. It's just really scary to run for office. Unfortunately, I have an excellent husband who also went to Southfield Public Schools, and so he understood why I needed to do this, because we do need younger people to come through the ranks. And someone asked me yesterday, how can we get the youth involved? And I said, I think that you're asking the wrong question. I think we should be asking why the youth aren't involved or don't want to vote, if you want to make that generalization.
Right.
And, you know, we have grown up where the same people have been in office time and time again. And just look at all of the things that have occurred. So am I going to be excited to vote for somebody when we have lived through now 2 recessions, when I graduate from college and I can't even make $15 an hour?
Yes.
You know, all of these things, can't afford to purchase a home, and to actually realize the American dream. You know, you have to realize that people have grown up in a very tumultuous time.
Millennials, our bracket, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up during the Columbine era, where we were afraid of school shootings. We grew up during 9/11. And so many traumatic things have happened that have really kind of put us in a mindset that, you know, maybe my vote doesn't count. And so I think that that's something that we need to address, to let people know why their vote does count. And I feel like I'm a living, you know, example of why your vote does count. A lot of young people came out to vote for me, and I don't take that lightly. because people want to see change in this community and in the state. And it has been the honor and the privilege of my life to serve the community that I grew up in.
Yes, congratulations. Oh my God, like making South Lathrop on the map, yes.
Chargers for life.
And you were talking about how people stay in office for a very, very long time. Do you think there should be like an age gap or age limit to, I don't know, 10 years or 10-year, I think that should be legislation, because I'll look at pictures from Bill Clinton era and I'll still see the same people from those pictures still in office today. And it's...
So this is a hard question because in Michigan, we have very strict term limits. So in the House of Representatives, you can only serve a total of 6 years with 3 2-year terms. So I have to run for office every 2 years, and I can serve a total of 6 years. In the Senate, you can serve a total of 8 years. So we do have very restrictive term limits in Michigan, which creates its own set of issues. What I think is more important is that we convince people that your vote matters and that you can put better people into office when those people aren't serving you. Right. So I don't know if I'm necessarily for, I think there should be some type of term limits, maybe on the federal level, but just speaking in Michigan, I feel like they're too short, because you can hardly get anything done in 6 years or 8 years. You kind of need that time to build relationships. There's such a constant turnover. And then it's so easy for people to kick the can down the road. So that's why we've had a mass defunding of schools, underfunding of our roads, because people will do just enough until they get out of office, and then they're not accountable to anybody. Right. And especially when you reach that third term and there's really nothing that you can do short of kind of a petition to get someone out of office, people can really start voting however they want to do with no accountability. So I think that it's really more incumbent upon us to keep politicians and people like myself, and I include myself in that category, hold us accountable. The best thing that you can do is let someone get a paycheck for 6 years or whatever, however long they're in office, and they never get a phone call. They never, they never hear opposition. They're going to vote however they're going to vote in their best interest, because no one has an issue with it. So I think it's incumbent upon us to hold people accountable, which I always do. I respond to my constituents. I try to go to every event that I can, because I want people to know that I'm accessible and available and that I'm listening to them. And I feel like that's what's missing a lot. A lot of people don't listen to their constituents. But if that happens, then you have to vote them out, which means that you have to be paying attention and have a certain level of engagement, which is hard because there's so many other things going on. Right. But it's important because we have a lot to do with your quality of life.
Yes. Speaking of our vote counting on a national level, as far as the popular vote in the Electoral College, a lot of people say, well, it's not worth it. Hillary Clinton won, she had the popular vote, but she still isn't president. What do you say to those people that says, I voted and my person didn't get elected?
So I understand the argument, but either way, if we all vote and we all vote for the person that we want, and it may be a lesser of two evils situation. I mean, our government is built on a two-party system. So you're not going to like everything about a candidate. So pick whoever has the most alignment with your values. But if 10,000 more people voted, then the electoral votes would have went to Hillary Clinton. So it's still overall, yes, she got 3 million more votes, but if we would have all voted overall, it wouldn't have mattered in the first place. So I know that there are arguments for abolishing the Electoral College. I'm not necessarily against those arguments, but either way, you have to vote. Okay. And if we do, then we can get whoever, we want into office. I mean, look at what happened with Barack Obama. Junior senator, funny name, Black man, Black family.
Yes.
And, he won by such high margins both times that it didn't matter. Mm. So the only thing to me that we need to be focusing on now is to just get out the vote.
Okay.
Vote no matter what the circumstances are, because honestly, if we don't vote, if you say your vote doesn't matter, then the same people are going to remain in office and nothing is going to change. So we can't even have a conversation about abolishing the Electoral College when there are clearly people in office that benefit from that and will not do anything about it. So my thought process is, we can have all the ideas, we can do all the things, but we have to have the power to do so. And that means that we need to hold up our end of the bargain and get the people in office first. Okay. Then we can talk about, our progressive agenda and whatnot, but you can have all the ideas, but you have to have the power to do so.
And as far as progressives, like you said, there's a spectrum, because you have progressives that agree on most things, and then you have progressives that are more center. Where do you fit on this spectrum?
It's interesting as a Black person to talk about progressivism, and I've been kind of dealing with this lately. For me, it depends on the issue. And I take it issue by issue. I think, I consider, and other people would consider me progressive. Now, where on that progressive spectrum I fall, I am not sure, because it depends on the issue. And I think that sometimes progressivism can be taken to the point where it is kind of colorblind. And, you have some people that are so progressive that it becomes a conversation about, basically socioeconomic status and kind of putting race to the side.
Okay.
So that's why it's a little bit difficult for me, because I feel like there are a lot of people on the progressive side that say, yes, race conversation matters to me. However, if you look at some of the policies, they're colorblind. And so when you propose things like, we're going to raise everybody's boats, well, we're not all in the same boat. Some of us are underwater. So if you raise the tide, it's going to, I'm still down here. And I think a lot of it doesn't take into account just racial disparities that exist. For example, when we're talking about raising money, and a lot of people on the progressive left, which I understand the argument, but when people say, we're not going to take any money from anything or anybody other than, grassroots, donations, well, that poses a problem for the Black community because historically we are not accustomed to giving. We vote in very high numbers, and we're very loyal to the Democratic Party. However, we may not give in the same amounts of money as other cultures do. So that puts us at a disadvantage for winning office, and that puts us at an advantage for being in leadership, because it's largely about how much money you can raise. And so if you say to somebody, well, we're all going to raise from our communities. Well, my ability to raise from my community might be 10,000, while yours might be 100,000. And I think that in and of itself is a disparity that people aren't talking about. So I would consider myself progressive, but I will always speak up to the racial disparities that exist within progressive.
Yes, within the party. How much of your policymaking, governing, is based on the donors that give to you?
Zero. So, I mean, that's a very, that's a good question. I think people believe, and I think it can get to a point where money influences your vote on things.
Mm-hmm.
I take very little money from corporations and associations. The majority of my donations are from grassroots. But when I take money, we're usually in alignment about issues. So like if, unions give me money, I support collective bargaining, right? And I have return money that has been given to me. So, if like a tobacco company sent me a check, I returned it because our values don't align. So that's personal for each and every person. But I don't think that you can assume that someone is going to be bought and paid for with a $250 check. It's sometimes it's just, and I don't know exactly what that line is or that mark is. It's different for everybody. But for me, I wouldn't accept anything that would compromise me or my values.
Right. Good. And now I want to talk more about the global pandemic, what's happening now. Like, how has that changed how you operate in your job?
So obviously working from home, and so does my staff. So if you call my office right now, you'll have to leave a message and someone will call back. Excuse me. Email is the best method to try to get a hold of us. But it's a little bit slower because, I value my staff and I don't want to put them in a situation where they feel uncomfortable. Right. Even though they're still making us go to work, that doesn't mean that we all need to go. And, just the more people you have there, I think the more, kind of it increases the likelihood of exposure. So my staff is working from home. Obviously, unemployment has been a huge, huge issue in the state.
Yes, a lot of my family members are on assistance.
And that, and people actually having COVID and me, making calls to people in the community and they actually have COVID or lost someone to COVID. And for people not to be able to grieve in a manner that they would usually grieve in, right. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And with UIA, there are a lot of people, the unemployment, there are a lot of people that still have not received assistance, not just in my district, but across the state. They put a hold on a lot of the unemployment claims for fraud on the federal level. Okay. And so, so that they can investigate. And it's happening in multiple states, and that was a federal decision, but people don't know that. And so they call my office for help. And what we can do is put their claim on unemployment's radar. But other than that, we don't have direct oversight over the administration. So there's really nothing that we can do. We do pester them about, my constituents, and I've heard a lot of people being helped, but we don't have any direct involvement on whether people get benefits or not. We can't move people up. We can't fix technical issues. And it's heartbreaking that we're really not able to help in the way that we would like to. Right. What we can do is allocate more money so that UIA has more resources, but the majority party has decided not to bring up that legislation to allocate more money yet. We're hopeful. We haven't really done any legislation pertaining to COVID except for maybe, a few bills. So, right. And that goes back to my point about power. We have defunded so many systems in the state of Michigan over years, decades. And, so a lot of those chickens are coming home to roost. We have dams breaking, we have bridges crumbling, we have education being defunded, and that didn't happen overnight. That happened over decades of defunding. And so when you pick your leaders and you want us to fix these things in 6 years, it's difficult.
Right.
It's difficult. And especially just being in the minority party. So the Republicans lead the House and the Senate, and we have a Democratic governor. What a lot of people don't realize is, and maybe I didn't realize it either, is the majority parties control what legislation is brought up for a vote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So if I pass, let's say, a roads bill that will increase the quality of every single piece of gravel in the state of Michigan for $1, if the majority party does not like my bill, they simply will not bring it up for a committee hearing, and they simply will not let it pass on the floor. So it's completely up to their discretion what bills do and do not get brought up for a hearing.
I have a side question. I was talking to a relative, and we were talking about Republicans. They brought it up that they're majority, and we were having a debate. If you are a Republican and you do not support the president, but you support other Republicans that support Donald Trump, inevitably this voter is supporting Donald Trump indirectly because they're giving power to his party. Would you agree with that?
I think so.
That's how it works, because, even if you're not a supporter of the president, giving your vote to that party inevitably supports him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also just, again, we live in a two-party system, so it's difficult. So I guess if it was kind of the other way, I would say, well, I don't agree with every single thing that the president does, or let's say it's Joe Biden, I don't agree with everything he does, but I'm still going to vote for, Democrats and be a part of the Democratic Party. But I also feel like what the Republican Party has become, as with Trump being the president, is something completely different. Now, if you would have made that reasoning under Bush, okay, I can see. But our country is literally being destroyed. And I think it's hard to separate yourself from people that, that are supporting the destruction of our country.
Right, exactly.
But that's also easy for me to say because I'm a Democrat. So
speaking of Democrats, I wanted to get your opinion on Biden being the presumptive nominee for president and other progressives in the party. What do you think about his policies? Are you for, Medicare for all, which I don't think he fully supports? What do you think?
So again, we're in a two-party system. Was Biden my first, second, third, fourth choice? No. He is our nominee for the Democratic Party. And so people have a choice. And, a lot of people don't like the choices, but we have two choices. It is going to be Trump or Biden. So, do I wish that Biden was more progressive on some issues? Of course. Would that philosophy keep me from not voting for him? No. I am going to vote for Biden, and I would vote for a dog walker before I voted for Trump. So, no offense to any dog walkers, but I think when the decision is destruction and not destruction. You pick not destruction, even though you want something different. You know, you want a utopia, but your choice is not destruction. And I'm just saying,
Right.
you know, I, like I said, I would consider myself a, you know, a progressive, but we have two choices. And so I will be voting for Biden. I have endorsed Biden, and I would do everything in my power to make sure that Biden is elected. Because again, if you don't have the power to even make change, then to me, you know, what are we talking about? And I do believe that Biden is open to listening, and I do think he has become more progressive as his campaign has went on. And it's incumbent upon us to keep pushing him and to keep him accountable and to make sure that he's talking about, you know, these very important issues that are important to progressives and important to moderates alike. But we have to get there first. We have to get there first.
Yes. And we're not going to keep you long, but my final question is about the current state of racial uproar and unrest as far as the protesting. And I don't know if there's really rioting. I don't know how true that is, that there's riots going on. What is the tangible results you'd like to see at the end of all of this, if it ends? Where, like, the legislation, or I don't know, what do you want to see?
Yeah. So I would like to see, obviously, a lot of changes within our policing system and police brutality ended. But I think we also need to start pushing forward our Black agenda and what that looks like, and equitable policies, because I think that there's issue with seeing policies in general through the lens of being colorblind. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at everything with a historical context of how do we even get to this point, and how do we make it better for the future. So some things that I would like to see happen is teaching, you know, slavery, the full extent of slavery in our schools. That shouldn't be something that I have to go to a museum in New Orleans to find out. That should be something that is taught. And I'm glad that there is a slave museum in New Orleans. But, you know, I realized that I didn't know the full extent of slavery, you know, even before I went. And I have had ancestors that are enslaved, and I know their names. And so that's one thing. As far as policing, obviously we need to ban certain techniques. I don't think that our police needs to be militarized.
Defunding the police, are you for that?
So I don't personally like using that term, because to me, I think it's really bad messaging, because it's not what people mean when they say it. So I think we should just say what we mean. But also, the funding comes from kind of the local level as well. So that's not something that I have personally to deal with. But we can make sure that the weapons that they're using, a lot of them come from the federal government, are not, you know, kind of passed to the local municipality. So I won't get into the funding aspect, because that is up to the local city councils and mayors. Implicit bias training for officers, even just creating some type of registry for people to know different police departments to know about the misconduct of a previous police officer, because there really isn't good tracking in that area. And sometimes police officers are dismissed and they can get a job in another city very easily. So tapping down on that. I think are some real kind of tangible things that we can do in this moment. And I know there's a lot of legislation on the federal level as well. But right now we're just compiling all the, ideas that I've seen. I might see something on social media and say, hey, that's a good idea. Let me look into that.
As far as like accountability, because I saw the list of the governor's plans or steps that the police is planning on taking, but the accountability part, like how police officers can have 4 or 5 days go by with something as gruesome as the recent death of George Floyd. Like, should there be like an automatic, like, if you do this, this is going to happen? So there's no gray area of 4 or 5 days, a week of this person being free.
And that also kind of links into your prosecutor, right? Which has to do a lot with mass incarceration. I think a lot of us kind of miss that piece of the puzzle too.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a prosecutor that's willing to prosecute these cases, then that's another problem. And so we need to make sure that, our prosecutors are, and those are elected positions. So, it's all full circle. When people say my vote doesn't matter, it does. It determines your city council who funds your police and fire departments.
Right.
And how it determines who your prosecutor is, and if they're using, are they using implicit bias training with their prosecutors, or are they using kind of this colorblind, well, the police brought them in, they must be guilty.
Right.
It determines, who you elect on city council, who your police chief is. That really sets the tone of how the officers act in the community. So right. It's just all tied together, and it's so important to vote and to know who you're voting for too. Right. It's not enough to just vote. You have to do your research, and I will even go one step further. You have to fund the people that you think would be good for the position. Because some people may not even make it to the ballot if they don't have enough funding to make it to the ballot. And one thing that kind of haunts me at night is how many people did I not support? How many good people couldn't make it to the ballot or couldn't send out a mailer to reach me because they didn't have enough funding, but they would have been excellent for the community. Stuff like that kind of keeps me up at night. If the community didn't come behind me, for example, and help me, donate to me, I might not be sitting here. So we have a lot of preliminary work to do. Yes, keep your politicians in check, make sure that they're accountable. But if they're not, the accountability comes in with us. Right. It comes in with your vote. That is the only way to really hold people accountable, truly accountable. So we need to make sure we're keeping that aspect in mind when we're having these conversations about, well, what can your politician do? We also need to be thinking about who's next in line to carry the torch, to either do something more progressive or to carry on the progressive legacy that someone's left. And those are some of the things that I think we need to start thinking about.
Is voter suppression a problem in Michigan? Because I know
well, voter suppression is an issue. I think it's the number one issue of our time. A lot of people will say, Medicare for all or that debate. I think the most important pressing issue of our time is voter suppression, Michigan and in the entire country.
Okay.
If our votes didn't matter, they wouldn't try so hard.
I know, that's what I was thinking. Like, they wouldn't be trying so hard to keep us.
The rhetoric around voting from home is fraud during the midst of a global pandemic.
Right.
In I forget which state it was, but with the Supreme Court race, was it Minnesota? Wisconsin. maybe it was Wisconsin. But with the Supreme Court race, and people had to stand in line because the court shut down their ability to vote by absentee, and people were getting COVID. But yes. And then we also found
Stacey Abrams is a big advocate for voting suppression since she lost. I don't know when, but that was in Georgia.
Yeah. And some states won't allow people who have been incarcerated to vote. That is voter suppression. You know, especially if you say going to jail for 3 years and I'm going to pay my debt to society, but yet you're never recognized as a full citizen when you get out.
Be linked to systemic racism, but
it is.
It's always.
It's full circle. It all comes full circle. I'm telling you, all these issues link together. But that is one of the biggest issues of our time. And so it just is heart-wrenching when I hear people say my vote doesn't matter. And my first thought is, you know, just voter suppression. Whatever that narrative was that told you that your vote doesn't count, it's working. And that's how people have been in office. And that's how things are that's why things are the way that they are. And so, yes, I think it's a huge issue. And so we really need to make sure we're mobilizing people to counteract that narrative, get people out to vote.
Thank you so much, Kyra, for talking with me about politics. Where can we reach you if you want to contact you?
Yeah, so I hope you will follow me on social media. It is Kyra H. Bolden on all social media platforms. And you can email me at kyra@votebolden.com. If you want to get in touch with my campaign side, if you want to get in touch with my legislative side, it's kyrabolden@house.mi.gov.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so proud that you're representing our district.
Thank you. It's the honor of my life. I absolutely love it, enjoy it, and I hope that people will see me fit to lead again, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you so much. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. You too.
And I'll talk to you next time then.
All right. Thank you so much.
Kyra. Bye.
Bye.